We love Ramondre Stevenson in Dynasty, but should we care about any other New England Patriots? We'll talk about all that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is former NFL scout Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, it's day 2 from Disney. Feels like day 1,000,000 from Disney, but here we go. We're back talking Dynasty. We're talking about the Patriots today as we continue our buy, sell, and hold series. I mentioned the name Ramondre Stevenson at the top. He's obviously the headliner of this team. Before we get into our buys, sells, and holds, I want to list each of these players because, Matt, honestly, I was just shocked there were so many. The New England Patriots have 9 players being drafted in Dynasty right now. They actually would have had 10. But they recently released James Robinson, so he's off that list. But here's their list. Ramondre Stevenson, the top guy, no surprise there. He is the RB13. My guy, Juju Smith-Schuster, wide receiver 53. Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver 67. The rookie, late round rookie, is the 3rd most valuable player on this team. That tells you all you need to know, but we'll keep going. Mike Gesicki, tight end 24, another new player to this team. Pierre Strong, RB 68. Tyquan Thornton, wide receiver 90. Mac Jones, quarterback 31. Devontae Parker, wide receiver 102. And Kendrick Bourne, wide receiver 109. Couple of veteran receivers to wrap up the Patriots group here. Now, Matt, I know you did not list Ramondre Stevenson as your buy. I couldn't get away from him. He's still the guy I want on this roster. I know he's going to be expensive. I know his value has gone up so much, certainly since last year, and really it seems to increase steadily every month. And even this James Robinson news, which is I don't think it's all that noteworthy, but you could even use that as another reason to push Stevenson up the list a little bit. Again, he's the RB13 based on May DLF Dynasty ADP. I see a couple of guys ahead of him, and including your boy Najee Harris, who
much rather.
I'd rather have Stevenson than him. So I think essentially he's in that group of Dynasty RB1s right now. 25 years old. He's going to carry the ball and really carry this team as far as they can go.
I love him. I really do. I think he's more talented than Najee, to be honest with you. Same draft class. I mean, I'd rather have him than ATN. I'd rather have him than Javonte. I'm just talking about guys that were drafted ahead of him, very recently here. So I put Stevenson as my hold, but easily could have been a buy. I think he's going to get so many touches. He's their best offensive player. But that's kind of where I'm going with this. Is I took a different route for the Patriots because they're so miserable. I mean, he's the only one being drafted anywhere close to high. Everyone else is so bad that my buys were basically almost everybody else, because I think this offense has nowhere to go but up in real life and certainly in dynasty perception. I think having a real offensive coordinator might help.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up as well. The not only the change in offensive coordinator, but literally having a coach who has been an offensive coordinator, has coached offense in his history, unlike what they had last season, really could make and should make a huge difference. We saw Stevenson succeed last year. We saw, a guy like Jacoby Myers have a solid year. He's now gone. But you make a good point. I mean, they bring in Juju, they bring in Boutte, they draft Boutte. They had Tyquan Thornton as their rookie receiver last year, and they've still got those veterans, Parker and Kendrick Bourne, hanging around. like there's so many of these guys from this team being drafted in our DLF ADP because we just don't know which one is really going to step up. And it wouldn't be a surprise at all if we look at this ADP from a year from now and half these guys are not even being drafted at all. That wouldn't be shocking.
No, but that would probably be good for the ones that are. You know what I mean?
Right.
If a couple get out of the way, that means somebody stepped up. And so I have all these names listed as buys because they don't cost a thing. And I want to start with Mac Jones just because I think he's an NFL quarterback. I mean, last year was miserable, but I think for the next 8 years, he will be a starting quarterback. So if you can get him at dirt cheap prices and his value goes up by 30, 40%, and he turns into the next Carr type guy that never runs but is an NFL starter, I think you made money on your investment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Certainly the most intriguing name, I think, from this group outside of Stevenson is Tyquan Thornton. And there has been some, there's been some buzz lately. I mean, we're still talking mini camp and, obviously we're desperate for NFL news at this point in the calendar year. So a little blurb can go a long way sometimes when it probably shouldn't. But again, you look at the depth chart, one of these guys, a couple of these guys are going to climb this depth chart and really turn into something. And I mean, I thought Tyquan Thornton was overdrafted when they took him, I believe on day 2, a little over a year ago. But he's sure going to have the opportunity.
I had to double check this. He was the 50th pick overall. He was the 18th pick in second round. I mean, when that happened live, I was doing draft coverage and my jaw hit the floor. I mean, he went ahead of George Pickens and, a lot of really talented guys. But that's why he's my number one buy. I don't care if you and I like him. They do, So to be wide receiver 90, I'll take him for nothing. I mean, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but in 2 different leagues, those end of rookie draft trades where it's like, take a next year's 5th so I can have a roster spot. I got Thornton for like a 5th round pick next year so a guy could make a pick, and I got Pierre Strong the same way. Like, people are giving these guys away, and they're both in their second year. They both were drafted rather high. I mean, Pierre Strong was a mid-4th rounder. Tyquan Thornton was a mid-2nd rounder. Just because they did nothing on the most dysfunctional offense in the league last year, I'm not going to crush them because the Patriots still like them.
Yeah, we kind of joked earlier talking about Stevenson that that the James Robinson news doesn't really impact Ramondre Stevenson. It does impact Pierre Strong. I do think it's a good sign for Pierre Strong that they were ready to move on already from Robinson, who they just added a few months ago. So I like Pierre Strong. There's really not much behind him. Of course, Damian Harris was on this roster a year ago. He's now gone after he missed most of the year anyway. So Ramondre and Pierre Strong, definitely want to have both of those guys on my dynasty rosters. Looking at Tyquan Thornton's trade value, looking at the trade finder at DLF, it's pretty low. It's not quite as low as the 5th rounder you stole him for. Nice work on that one. But multiple examples of Thornton for a future second, Thornton for a future second and a third, Thornton for the 3.11 this year. So there's a lot of examples where he is going cheap. And it's kind of a why not move, right? A young wide receiver with that draft capital, with a wide open depth chart. I mean, as much as I love Juju Smith-Schuster, if he's not the wide receiver 1 statistically on this team by the end of the year, that wouldn't really even be shocking either. If one of these guys outperformed him, whether it's the veterans like Parker or maybe one of the young guys in Thornton or even Kayshon Boutte. I don't see it with him, but I do think Thornton, you could make a case for Thornton there.
Yeah. My last little nugget on Strong is Stevenson's a very good receiver, But it wouldn't shock me if they, after a year of NFL seasoning and learning pass protection and learning the passing game, do they think he's James White or Vereen? I mean, there's been so many passing down Woodhead. I mean, the history shows they like that little dynamic guy, and Strong's like the only one that's capable of doing that.
We're going to talk about some players from this Patriots roster to sell, get off of your roster, and we'll do that next.
Guys, make your way to FanDuel, because right now new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's a lot of money. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. I mean, how can you beat that? That, amongst many other things, are what makes FanDuel great. I mean, it's really the only place to bet. They have all these different promotions every day. As you can imagine, you could do NBA, NFL, everything you're ever looking for. The app is unbelievably easy to use. It's safe and secure, more importantly, and you get paid instantly. I mean, the snap of fingers, you get your money back. So there's nothing really to scare you away, that's for sure. I mean, there's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook, amongst every other thing you want. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, all one word, to get a no sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Now, we talked about some players from this Patriots team that we'd like to buy, like to get on our dynasty rosters. Let's talk about the alternative now, players we want to move on from. And this was tough for me simply because outside of Stevenson, these guys just don't have any value. You talked about how cheaply you can get some of the prospects, Thornton and Booty, and even the young quarterback in Mac Jones. This was the challenge. I ultimately picked a couple of guys who have had some name value, have had some success in different ways. I went with Mike Gesicki, the tight end. Again, he's tight end 24 right now. And also Kayshon Boutte, obviously a rookie, so his success came in the collegiate ranks early in his career. But I think both of those guys have some name value, and obviously not as much as was once the case. But if I can cash in on either of those, and I'm talking like a couple third-round picks for either one, I'm not even expecting a second rounder, obviously, for either one of those guys right now, but get something that I like better on my roster rather than those two. That's the route I'm going. Gesicki is he's tight end 24. He's being drafted ahead of a few guys I would rather have. I still want Dawson Knox above Gesicki, even after the addition of Dalton Kincaid. Yeah. I'd rather take a chance on a guy like Tucker Kraft, the rookie for the Packers, Jelani Woods, the Colts, second-year tight end. Some of those guys going behind Gesicki in our latest ADP that don't quite sit right with me. So those are my two, Gesicki and Boutte, although admittedly this was a tough task to find a sell from this roster.
100%. And that's the only reason I put Juju, is I could maybe get something for him. Well, it's not the only reason. The other reason is I wanted to, poke you a little bit because that's your guy.
Yeah. I understand.
But I mean, I think Juju will probably end up with 80 catches, not a ton of yards, 5 or 6 touchdowns, do what he usually does. And, I think he is who he is at this point, but he's not the definition of a sell. I mean, we opened the show by saying everybody's so cheap here. I would rather go buy Parker or Bourne or Thornton and Boutte. I think is another. I'm just focusing on the receivers. I think Boutte has a little bit of buzz, and it might be the last time he has buzz in his career. So dump him if you can, And Juju has a little bit of value, so move on, So I don't know. I'm not saying I'm buying this offense because it's miserable, but I am at their cost. There's a lot more buy opportunities than sells.
I mean, how much of a turnaround do you expect with the offensive coordinator change, though?
I don't think they're very talented. There's not very good players, but I think it'll go from.
That's a problem.
Maybe it's a 22nd best offense.
Oh,
Maybe.
Yeah, that's not very reassuring.
No.
The price on Juju, the price on Juju Smith-Schuster is way down, as we all really know at this point. Again, wide receiver 53 in our ADP. Looking at some recent trades, it's essentially a second rounder is his market now, and I think there's a lot of people who would jump at the chance to get a second rounder for Smith-Schuster. Here's the trade of Juju for Jalen Hyatt. That's kind of in that same range.
I'd like to turn him into Tank Bigsby or Tajay Spears or somebody like that.
Juju for Keenan Allen is a nice one if you can pull that off.
Yeah.
That trade went down. He was sold for a fourth rounder. So I would not suggest doing that. Don't.
No.
And I mean, in fact, I would say he's the favorite to be the wide receiver one on this team. I think that's probably obvious at this point. He signed that another short-term deal. I think this one was it 2 or 3 years? But again, he'll be back out on the market soon, which has happened before. So
the league's telling us what they think about him.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But
I mean, 3 smart organizations, Patriots, Chiefs, Steelers, are all making short-term deals with him. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're not married.
But at the same time, I mean, a fourth rounder.
Oh, I'm much rather have Juju. That's a crazy trade.
Yeah.
I mean, you could start Juju and you don't love it, but you could start him on a bye week or whatever. Fourth rounder is worth nothing.
Right. I think the moral of the story is that because the price is so down for most of these Patriots, it's tough to find a market to get them off to your team, to sell them. Whether you're talking about Juju, Gesicki, Mac Jones, certainly. I mean, what about Mac Jones in a super flex league, Matt? Actually, let's hold off that.
Okay.
I want to talk about that next. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Everydayers, check back tomorrow. Kate and Marcus will be back. They'll be finishing up the AFC East and talking about those New York Jets. Tons of interesting players on that roster. So check out that show tomorrow. Right now, though, Matt, let's finish up the Patriots conversation. Mac Jones, I started to ask you about this, and this is really the player where I think we could see some really big changes with the offensive coordinator situation. I listed Mac Jones as my hold, but I'm tempted to be a buyer in Superflex. What do you think? What are your expectations?
He was one of my many buys because I just think his stock can't bottom out anymore. I mean, I know Bailey Zappi's out there. If I could trade Bailey Zappi in a Superflex league for a bag of chips, I would. I think he's terrible. Someone might think that he can overtake Mac, and great. I think Mac really did not benefit from his circumstances last year. Lack of talent and just coordinator and coaching crushed him. And he was very vocal about it and very frustrated about it. I like him more in the real world than I do fantasy, just because his style of play doesn't result in a lot of fantasy points. But like I said to start the show, I think he's going to be one of the 32 starting quarterbacks for the next 5 to 8 years.
Yes, ends up just playing 14 games this past season. So missed 3 games, ended up as the quarterback 22 because of that. But if you look at his points per game, it was mostly in line with what we saw during his rookie season. Drops by about a point per game. So some drop off for sure, but still gave us 3 QB1 games, several more games in that quarterback 2 range, which again, obviously matters if you're playing in Superflex. And the price is just so far down. Quarterback 31 in our ADP right now. Like I said, I had him listed as a hold, but I'm starting to think he's a buy. And it goes back to what you said earlier in the show. You've got confidence that he will be a starter for the next several years in whether it's in New England or elsewhere, but he'll be a starter in the league. I think there's concern that he might not be, right? I think that's what's bringing the value down. The Bailey Zappi talk that we had last year, which, in hindsight, I guess was a little bit comical. There were rumors that they would trade up for Will Levis or that they would draft a quarterback in this most recent NFL draft. Obviously that didn't happen. So the panic button, right? We took the hand away from the panic button on Mac Jones. And I think we should maybe start targeting him in some dynasty leagues.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he's quarterback 1 or 31 in ADP implies to me that the dynasty community looks at him like he's Baker Mayfield, like he's just a spot starter that somebody has to live with until they draft their guy. And I think he's better than that.
Yeah. Looking at some recent trades, it's actually lower than I thought. These are all from super flex leagues. Lots of examples of a second rounder for Mac Jones. I mean, honestly, if you're talking about second round of a super flex league, you're probably not even getting Will Levis at that point. Maybe he goes early second round. Would you rather have Mac Jones or Will Levis right now, Matt?
Jones. I don't think Levis is going to be a good quarterback. And I think Jones will be an average starting quarterback. Yeah.
Yeah. Mac Jones for Michael Mayer. These are all super flex leagues. So we like Mayer, but give me that quarterback.
Oh yeah.
Mac Jones for Wan'Dale Robinson. Again, I love Wan'Dale, the UK guy, but this value is way, way down. I'm sending
really way down.
I'm sending some Mac Jones offers when we finish up the show here, Matt.
I like it. Yeah, definitely. That's why I talk through these things. That makes it really obvious to me.
We talked Stevenson. We talked those receivers, Juju. I mentioned Gesicki as a sell. Do you think? I mean, you're really just a disastrous year with Miami last year. They tag him and then really just don't use him at all with the new coaching staff. Do you see Gesicki bouncing back at all? Hunter Henry's still on this roster. We didn't even mention that name.
Yeah.
Because he's not getting drafted currently. He doesn't have an ADP. I think I'd still rather have Hunter Henry than Gesicki.
I'm really down on Gesicki, but my only reservations are two things. He's very, very athletic, and he absolutely is deployed as a slot receiver, not an inline tight end. Maybe, and that's not George Kittle like in Miami. I don't know why Miami franchised him. He never was a fit for me. I think they regretted it from day one just by their usage. But I guess there's three things I like about Gesicki. He's super athletic. Patriots made it a priority. I mean, he didn't sit around in free agency long. Mm-hmm. So their pre-free agency meetings we're targeting this guy. Yeah. There's certainly opportunity to catch passes in this offense. And what is he, 26, 27? I mean, tight ends hit their stride at 27. Could he have a Evan Ingram move? You know what I mean? So maybe I'm talking myself into buying him at this super cheap rate. Throwing him at the bottom of the roster.
I mean, you saw what I did with Mac Jones, even just in our conversation.
Yeah. He's dirt cheap.
When these players are so cheap, and outside of the RB1 spot, the depth chart is wide open and could go a number of different ways. It really does become I'll take a shot. I'll take a shot on Gesicki and see if he bounces back. I'll give Juju another chance. Maybe Devontae Parker's the wide receiver 1. Like, we could even go there with it, which just feels crazy, honestly. But that's the reality of this team right now.
I'm glad you mentioned Parker. I mean, Parker's wide receiver 102. Kendrick Bourne is wide receiver 109. I think Kendrick Bourne is good at football, and he got in the doghouse because he dropped the ball or ran the wrong. Actually, I know what happened was he was late to a meeting in training camp, and Bill never forgave him. They gave him money. He's good at football. And Devontae Parker was never worth what any of us paid for him in Dynasty. But he doesn't stink. He might lead the team in receptions this year. These guys are going after wide receiver 100. They're free.
Oh, the Patriots. What are we going to do with this team? That's going to do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Remember to follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL, and I'm Ryan MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.